Today, we are going to talk about funding a policy with a lump sum. In my experience, it is very common to encounter individuals who are attracted to the idea of putting money into a whole life insurance policy, usually for the cash value benefits, being safe, liquid, and tax-free. They want to access it, have a lot of fun with their policy, use it for business, real estate, on and on and on. However, they're not attracted to the idea of making payments for a long period of time, which I 100% understand. So it is possible to fund a policy with a lump sum that typically involves taking a lump sum of money and funding a policy over several years. When I say several years, it could range anywhere between 3 to 5 years. Sometimes it could be 2, but the sweet spot for most individuals is typically between 3 and 5 years. Why I say most individuals is it does depend on age. If we have health issues, that could have an impact. We've got some videos that really dive into the details as far as why it might make sense to fund a policy over 5 years instead of 3 years. I would check out the above video if you really want to go through a deep dive. But with all that said, what we're going to look at today is a case study of an individual who's interested in a whole life insurance policy. He's got a lump sum of money. He wants to get the money into a policy, and he outright stated, I probably do not want to add money once I get this lump sum into the policy. If I have the option to do so, that's great, but where I stand today, I want to focus on getting this money in, maximize the cash value, and then I do want access to it potentially for real estate investments in the future. So the details we have are as follows. We've got a 46-year-old male. He's got a lump sum of $600,000 that he'd like to move into a policy. Now, what he wants to see the cash value available immediately. He did emphasize an early break-even point, so we are going to look at different options that display that. Liquidity is very important to him. He's got it in cash right now, so it's very liquid. However, he's not super comfortable with it being in cash with a bank for a number of reasons. So he's looking at a whole life insurance policy as a nice alternative. So the sweet spot for his age is moving that money into a policy over 3 to 4 years. And at his age, it's really a matter of preference. We are going to go through the guaranteed values and non-guaranteed values so you can see which one will maximize the policy to the greatest degree. However, it'll be one of those situations where you'll probably look at the numbers and say, who cares? Like, I can go with either option. So really, it's a matter of preference of A, do I want to get it in as quickly as possible? 3 years consists of 3 payments of $200,000, and 4 years are 4 payments of $150,000. If I go 2 years, you'll find it will be not as efficient as 3 or 4 years. It would actually hurt me from a performance standpoint, and the same is true of 5 years. So when I say sweet spot, 3 to 4 years, I'm talking about what's the fastest time period I can get that $600,000 into a policy and maximize the overall cash value, both short-term and long-term. So I've got the 3-pay and 2-pay option, and we already mentioned this, that he does not want to add more money after he moves that $600,000 into a policy. So the options, we've got 3 different products we're going to look at, A, B, and C. We'll see higher cash value up front. We'll see some options with higher cash value long-term. We will look at the option that produces the highest guaranteed cash value. And then he also requested the internal rate of return. So he likes to analyze Excel spreadsheets, really see what the highest growth rate is on a policy, also look at it in terms of dollars. So we put that together, but the internal rate of return is something that is valuable to look at, especially if you like to see a rate associated with the growth on your life insurance policy. Some just prefer dollars. Why I like it, and this is my opinion, it provides some clarity, particularly with life insurance policies. Usually I see a dividend rate. We're going to look at samples with MassMutual and Guardian. Guardian has a dividend rate of 5.75%. Then MassMutual has a dividend rate of 6%. However, those are gross rates that are applied to a policy after the company's insurance expenses and such. So the internal rate of return is a report we can request directly from the life insurance company. It's compliant approved, where we see, okay, here's the net growth rate as time passes. So let's get on into it and have some fun. So to begin, we've got MassMutual, in particular their 10-pay product on the left, which is a fantastic option for cash accumulation. So this is based on their non-guaranteed values and their present dividend interest rate of 6%. So what do we see? Annual outlay, this is his funding, $150K per year for 4 years, which results in a total dollar amount of $600,000. Break-even point, just about year 4, where he's paid in a total of $600, he's got $597. This is, however, based on what? The present dividend interest rate. Things will change over time. That's where tracking the actual performance of a policy is very important. By year 5, he's positive, and if he goes with this option, just based on MassMutual's track record and what we've seen with them, he likely will be cash positive in year 5 if he follows through with what we see here. We've got a death benefit of $1.95 million. That gives him what? If you're new to this, you might not know this term, but that's okay. It's a MEC limit of just about $150,000. He's attracted to a whole life insurance policy for the cash value benefits, being a safe, liquid, and tax-free area to position funds. Tax-free, we can access that cash value tax-free if what? If our policy does not become classified as a MEC. That's how we solved for the death benefit. The same is true of the Guardian examples we'll look at shortly. Internal rate of return. So we mentioned that dividend rate is 6%. However, that's not what he's actually earning. Annual internal rate of return and average internal rate of return. Annual isolates what the policy is growing by each year. For example, if you have money in the stock market and you said, I earned 15% or 30% last year. If I look at 2019 and what the S&P 500 did, I earned 30% last year. That's fantastic. That's isolating the yearly growth, just focusing on that year. Whereas the average, in this case, the average internal rate of return, is going to take into account all years, particularly the negative years, because that's going to pull my overall growth rate down. So for example, the first year you pay in $100K, the annual and average are identical because we only have 1 year to work with. So the average is just 1 year. However, year 2, you'll notice that they're different. If I look at let's look at year 4 to 5, because that's when I break even. Year 4, you've got 597, call it 598 in cash value. You've paid in 600. That's less in cash value than what you paid in. That's why your average IRR is still in the red. Next year, because you've got more in cash value than what you've paid in, that's why you have a positive internal rate of return. So I see what it's growing by annually, then the average over time. And we've got to track this and always update it if this is the actual policy he goes with. Tracking the actual performance is very, very important because things will change compared to what we see here. Then we've got Guardian's L95 policy, both with their 5% and 10% PUA fee. Showing 3 options is not super overwhelming in my opinion, but it can be. For me, I'd want to see anywhere from 2 to 3. That's just me personally. 2 to 3 of the top options that everyone selects that meets what I'm trying to accomplish, that meets my goals. We showed 3 for one specific reason here. He talked about an early break-even point and maximizing the upfront cash value. That lower PUA fee gives him that. So the first year cash value is similar to the 10-pay product here at 132, but look at year 2, here at 285. That's the highest cash value compared to all 3 options here in year 2, and your break-even point is between years 3 and 4. So he does have very rich cash values up front. If he's interested in the liquidity, he wants to be able to access it. That L95 with the 5% PUA fee will accomplish that. So it's a nice option to be aware of. Also, when we look at the guaranteed cash values, that will have the highest overall guaranteed value. So that's another thing to consider there. However, what a lot of people look at is, okay, when I look at this 10% PUA fee, what I don't like is this. I see a big bite up front. It takes a bit longer to break even. But long term, what I like, if I look at year 15, age 60, there's a noticeable difference there. Here it's about 30 grand. As time passes, it becomes more and more significant. So I've got two options here with Guardian, one with more cash value up front and one with more cash value long term. The same is true of the long-term death benefit when I look at that. Let's look at the next option, and there's not much difference here when we look at the performance, aside from the first 3 years. And by the way, if he says, hey, I want to get the money in faster, that's my goal, $200K over 3 years is going to make more sense. Because there's, again, not much difference once you pass year 4. Break even on the 10 pays year 4. Last one, it was between 4 and 5. That 5% PUA fee is between years 3 and 4. The 10% PUA fee is between 4 and 5 when we look at it. We've got the annual and average internal rates of return. But really, when making a decision, here's often what people will progress through. They'll say, okay, I'm working with a lump sum. What's the difference between these carriers? You could start with a dividend rate. MassMutual is at 6%, Guardian's at 5.75%. That doesn't matter to me. The reason why is when I look at MassMutual and Guardian, and you can throw Northwestern Mutual and New York Life in the mix, those are your 4 major mutual companies. At one point in time, all of those companies have led the pack in terms of having the highest dividend rate and showing the best numbers on an illustration. What I've noticed is regardless of who shows the best looking numbers on an illustration, they've all produced very high actual cash values. They all claim that they're the best. I've seen strong results from all of them. I have a hard time saying one is just hands down the best. If you go with any of them with a properly designed policy, you'll see strong results. So aside from that, the dividend rates, what are other differences? Flexibility. That's often the factor that helps people refine their decision-making process. So when we look at the flexibility here, does he need it first and foremost? Probably not. Why is that? Because he's funding this, the lump sum of $600,000. He's got the cash on hand. So he doesn't need that flexibility to adjust payments over time. At least that's not what I think. However, I still want to ask that question and go over the options. Never assume, because things, we can't read other people's minds, you've got to ask. But anyway, the flexibility with MassMutual is this. If we've got the proper riders and such attached, we can easily adjust payments one time per year on our anniversary date. So let's say he starts off with $200,000, then he's got his $400K in the bank, and he says, hey, this huge opportunity came up. I needed to use the $400K for a real estate deal. That's really cash flowing nicely, but I can't fund the policy at $200K anymore. I used the cash. I'm not going to have it back for another couple years. That's okay. So with Mass, what you could do then in year 2 is we would adjust the payment. Maybe we scale it down to $30,000 or closer to $20K, just the minimum premium. Maybe we don't pay it if we elect the dividends and interest to pay it. There's a lot of options there. But when we can scale it down and then scale it back up without having to go through underwriting, meaning on the back end, we, the agent, just update the total funding amount with MassMutual. They produce a new bill, and then you, the policyholder, can fund it, is on your policy anniversary date, which is a fancy word for your premium due date. One time per year. If we're comfortable with that, MassMutual is a great option there. Guardian, the difference with flexibility is this. $200,000 max, the minimum premium, just about $20K. And that includes the premium, term insurance riders, everything we have attached. Could be a little bit higher than that. But with Guardian, he can commit just to the minimum. So that's what he's billed for, and that's what he pays each year. And then the rest, the other $180,000, which would go toward our paid up additions rider, which is how we maximize the cash value. Check out our video on policy design. That can be added at leisure. So he can just throw it in whenever he wants. It can be partial. He's not required to hit that. So it's very, very flexible. So if you're thinking, hey, here's what I think I can hit, but I would like more flexibility, Guardian does have that feature, which is very, very nice. There's some drawbacks if we want to fund it for a long period of time at a high dollar amount, but this is where we just want to talk through those details or provide information so you can make an informed decision. So those are the differences with flexibility. And then when we look at the guarantees, we're going to look at these two to analyze the guarantees, the 5% and 10% PUA fee. And here we go. So on the left, we've got our non-guaranteed values. We'll look at the guarantees in a second. But what this compares is the 200K per year option, 5% PUA fee on the left, 10% PUA fee on the right. This is what we just looked at, except we've got this, which makes it a little bit easier to see what the cash value difference is. So what do you notice? For about the first 10 years, which is usually the case, that 5% PUA fee option has more upfront. As time passes, however, we've got significantly greater cash values with the 10% PUA fee and more death benefit too. Sometimes this is asked, like it doesn't make sense to some to say, hey, wait a minute, if I've got more money in a policy up front, shouldn't that be earning interest and produce greater results for me? Yes, if I'm looking at just a flat interest-bearing account, right, not a life insurance policy. Why I see higher long-term cash value with the 10% PUA fee is because what the company is doing is they're taking more of your PUA payment up front, so you're giving them more of your money to work with, and they're saying, hey, if you give this up front, give this to us up front, we can go out in the marketplace and we think we can earn a higher return, and then based on the non-guaranteed values you see here in the illustration, we should be able to pay you a higher dividend as a result. So you do have more long-term potential there. That's the main thing to be aware of. But you are with a company here, any of the major mutuals, that we've seen them deliver strong non-guarantees. With that said, however, what was something that he requested that we wanted to show when we go back to those options? Higher what? Guaranteed values. So let's take a look at this. Here we go. Pretty cool. Exact same thing, but based on the guarantees. What do you notice now? Well, the break-even point's different. 5% PUA fee between 7 and 8. 10%, here 10. Cash value difference. Now what do you notice? This is referring to the 10% PUA fee. We've got less, not just for the first 10 years, but forever. The reason why is because you have the exact same product here with the exact same guaranteed rate. The difference is that you have a higher PUA fee. So if you take dividends out of the equation, what ends up happening? Well, the higher fee is going to drag on the policy performance, cash value, and death benefit when you compare the two. So that is something that is good to be aware of. And in experience, depending on who you're speaking with, people view this differently. Some really like the stronger guarantees. Some have gravitated toward the 10% PUA fee. You've got the option to split it if you wanted to go with one of each. But I have found that it is a good option to show just because we've had mixed results as far as what people gravitate toward. So a case like that, if we don't see a trend of everyone gravitating toward option A, we've got it split. We definitely want to make sure we show it in that respect. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I do hope that it was helpful. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button, subscribe for more. Please leave any questions or comments below. And as always, I hope this helps. Thanks so much for watching all the way through. Hey guys, Steve Parisi here. If you enjoyed the content you just saw, please subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell for future videos. If you'd like more information or to see some custom policies for yourself, feel free to call or email our offices at the contact information below.